My name is Pastor David Esco. I pastor the Argo Church of God down in Walker County. I grew up in this building. I remember when it was built in the late 60s. The original name of the church back in them days was Pratt Highway Church of God. It stemmed from the old Pratt City Church of God and just moved and relocated here when I was about 5 years old, and then I grew up in this building. I got dedicated. My mother dedicated me when I was a baby, standing right there. I got saved in the altars of this church, was baptized in that baptistry as a kid, was called to preach when I was 12 years old in this building. Met my wife of 40 years in this building, who has passed away now, but met her when I was 13 in this building. Even kissed my wife for the first time out as a 15-year-old kid out on the steps of this building. I've seen God perform so many miracles in this building over the years. I've seen people get up out of wheelchairs. I've seen people be delivered from alcohol and drugs and demonic spirits in these altars. Seen a little 5-year-old girl raised from the dead right in the back here on the floor one night. She died on the floor. The paramedics said she was dead, but God raised her. The good news is the same God that was in this building then is the same God still here today.
Wanda Purdue. I'm a member of the Star. We did a transition from St. John to the Star. I've been at St. John since the 2000. We was going through a situation and Pastor Beavers came and rescued us. And with everything that we did, it was a process, but it was transparency. For everything that was happening, he always, talked to us about it, and before it happened, to see how we felt about it. He was very concerned about the members of St. John and how it was going to affect us. He didn't want to just throw something at us. It was a good thing. I'm glad to be a member of the Star.
This is why we do what we do. We want heaven to get big, we want hell to get small. But aside from seeing the power of God move in such an incredible way down through the years, we are also involved in community development. We revitalize communities through education, financial literacy, workforce development, housing, recreation, and the church. When we bought our Forestdale location, it came with an entire house that you see. That house needs to be revitalized, and what we're getting ready to do next year is revitalize that home as well as the parking lot, and we cannot do this without your giving. I want to thank you so much in advance. Save the date for Shoot for the Star Sunday, the first Sunday in December at all locations, 2025.
We want to make heaven larger and hell smaller. Salvation is free, but it costs to do ministry, as he always say, so if and then we want this did, that's what it's going to take.
So we are alive and in living color. The government is shut down, but heaven and the church are still open. We are being the hands and feet of Jesus the Christ. People have been cut off from SNAP benefits, and they are unable to put food on the table, just basic necessities of life. And I thank God for how people have given not to a church, but through our church, for us to be able to meet a need in a time of crisis. I really believe with all of my heart that the obstacle in the world is the opportunity for the church to be light in the middle of darkness.
Hey, my name's Pastor Rich, and I'm the senior minister at St. Luke's Episcopal Church in Crestline. Pastor Beavers and I are old friends, and we've done outreach together. But in this time of great need, we were able to partner and help do a small part in making this big day possible. I hate that we're having to do it, but I also am grateful to God that we've been brought together again to serve God's people. So thank you. It's a great honor. We love the Star.
Today we're giving out food boxes. We have prepared over 1,000 food boxes for a giveaway today to those that are in need due to the government shutdown. And we're just happy and elated. Right now we have 6 to 12 stations, and we can supply 12 cars at a time with food boxes. We got meat, we got vegetables, we have produce, we have paper towels, we have tissue, we have food boxes with numerous amounts of canned goods in it. And we just thank God for the bounty and the abundance of food that has been given to us.
I'm a furloughed government employee, and my experience here, this is my church home of over 30 years, and so it's always a pleasure, always love, always support and just family, you know.
My experience today has been wonderful. I arrived early this morning, waited in line for a little bit. After my interview, things seem to be moving pretty quickly. And we're just thankful that you guys are out here helping people that need the help.
My name is Ronald Wright, and I'm the campus pastor of the Star Church in Pell City, Alabama. And on today, we have the opportunity to feed thousands of people that are right here in the state of Alabama who have not received their SNAP benefits. It's truly an honor and a blessing just to be able to be the hands and feet of Jesus. And we're so glad that we have the opportunity to know Christ and make him known to the world.
And they still coming. Does this phrase sound familiar? This is what we enthusiastically shout when people make decisions for Jesus every single week. Easter 23 through Easter 24, 1,004 people said yes to Jesus through the Star Church. Easter 24 through Easter 25, 1,000 plus more people said yes to Jesus through the Star Church. January through September this year, 2025, 821 people have already said yes to Jesus through the Star Church. Because souls are one of the only things that last forever, every time that we give through the Star Church, there is an eternal return on our investment. Your gifts have been and will continue to be used to bring more people to Jesus. Mark your calendars and save the date for Shoot for the Stars Above and Beyond Sunday, December the 7th, 10 a.m., 2025 across all locations as we give generously above and beyond our tithe, not to our church, but through our church for the purpose of filling up heaven and emptying out hell. This is our unapologetic ask. Number one, pray about and consider a generous end of the year financial gift beyond your tithe. Number two, business owners, pray about and consider giving a generous additional gift out of your corporate business. Number three, believe God for the amount that he places in your heart. Number four, obey God when he places the amount in your hand. That's Sunday, December the 7th, 10 a.m. across all locations. We're shooting for the stars. Great day, ladies and gentlemen. This is the day the Lord has made. We choose to rejoice and be glad in it. I want to say welcome to the Star Church. We've been in a brand new series entitled Make It Make Sense. For those of us that have lived in Birmingham, Alabama, and we have matriculated through the election season, this is not what you think. We are not spelling sense S-E-N-S-E, but instead we are spelling sense C-E-N-T-S. Look at the person beside you and say, neighbor. Come on, you got to say it like you mean it. Say neighbor. Say make it make sense. I really believe with all of my heart that it is the will of God for the people of God to have more than enough to sow, more than enough to save, more than enough to spend, more than enough to share, and more than enough to grow. I'm going to say it again. It is the will of God for the people of God to have more than enough to sow. Somebody shout, more than enough to sow. To have more than enough to save. Somebody shout, more than enough to save. To have more than enough to spend. Somebody shout, more than enough to spend. To have more than enough to share. Somebody shout, more than enough to share. And to have more than enough to grow. Somebody shout, more than enough to grow. If you missed the first two installments of this series on More Than Enough to Sow, which was on sowing and tithing and More Than Enough to Save, make sure that you connect with us on our YouTube channel and go back and grab the part that you missed. And today's message from this series is a simple message entitled More Than Enough to Spend. It is the will of God for the people of God, not just to have more than enough to sow, more than enough to save, more than enough to share, and more than enough to grow, but God wants you to have more than enough to spend. That being said, today's scripture reference is Proverbs chapter number 6, verses 6 through 8. It reads as follows: Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, no ruler, no overseer, provides her meat in the summer and gathers her food in the harvest. That is Proverbs chapter 6, verses 6 through 8. I'm going to say it again. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, no ruler, no overseer, provides her food in the summer and gathers her food for the harvest. Today's message is a simple message entitled More Than Enough to Spend. Look at the person beside you. Say, neighbor, it is the will of God for you to have more than enough to spend. It is undeniably true that Solomon, son of David, third king of Israel, is in fact considered to be the wisest man to have ever walked the earth, with the exception of Jesus the Christ, son of the living God, who is wisdom himself. How did Solomon become so wise? Solomon did not gain wisdom by way of his own experience, but instead he gained wisdom by simply asking God. Experience is a teacher of wisdom, but experience is not the only teacher of wisdom. Experience is a teacher of wisdom, but experience is not the best teacher of wisdom. If you acquire wisdom only by way of experience, you get the wisdom, but it comes with something else. Dr. Beavers, what does it come with? It comes with pain. It comes with heartache. It comes with tears. It comes with mistakes. It comes with bumping our head. As a consequence, why settle for gaining wisdom by way of experience when the only thing that you have to do is just ask God? If you ask God, you can bypass the pain. If you ask God, you can bypass the tears. If you ask God, you can bypass the heartache. If you ask God on the front end, you can bypass the mistakes on the back end. We know that this is true because James, the half-brother of Jesus, declared in James chapter number 1, beginning with verse number 5, that if any of you lack wisdom, let him ask of God. For God gives it liberally and freely, and upbraideth not. But let him ask in faith. Somebody shout faith. Somebody sing it again with your preacher voice. Somebody shout faith. Nothing wavering, for he who wavers is like the wave of the sea, driven by the wind and tossed, and should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. For a double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. When Solomon gained wisdom, he did not get it by way of experience. He got it by simply asking God. At the beginning of his kingship, God went to Solomon and offered him a blank check. He said, Solomon, what is it that thou would have for me to do on your behalf? At a young and a tender age, Solomon didn't ask for anything material. Solomon didn't ask for a 67 Cutlass Supreme sitting on Peter Paul's, bow-legged out with a bowling ball interior with a flip-flop paint job with 24-inch rims that still spins even when the car stops. That's not what Solomon asked for. Solomon said, Lord, if you could just give me the wisdom to be able to lead your people. And God said back to Solomon that since you have asked for wisdom to lead my people, and it's not about you, but it's all about what you can do for my people, I'm not just going to give you wisdom, but on top of the wisdom, I'm going to give you riches, wealth, and honor all at the same time. As a consequence, he's not just the wisest man to have ever walked the earth, but he is the wealthiest man to have ever walked the earth. He was wealthier than Bill Gates. He was wealthier than anybody that you can name in 2025 at this particular moment in time. Solomon was filthy rich, and Solomon had extreme wealth. Solomon is the writer of the book of Proverbs, chapter number 1 through chapter number 29. And it is this Solomon who's not only wealthy, but what amazes me is how he operates with his wealth. Notice when Solomon comes up on a small piece of change, when Solomon gets a raise, when Solomon gets a promotion, Solomon is not frivolous with his wealth, but Solomon is frugal with his wealth. Look at the person beside you. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that Solomon was not frivolous with his wealth, but Solomon was frugal with his wealth. Dr. Beavers, I need you to make that make sense. To be frivolous when you have money and when you have wealth means that you are wasteful in your spending. To be frugal when you have money and when you have wealth means that you are wise with your spending. I want to ask you this question. When you come up on a little bit extra, When you come up on a small piece of change, when you get a raise, when you get a bonus, when you get a promotion, when you get an unexpected check in the mail, are you frivolous or are you frugal? If you are frivolous, that means you are wasteful. You are robbing Peter to pay Paul, to pay back Bartholomew, and you are spending it on any and everything that your heart desires. But if you are frugal, you are wise with your spending, because you recognize that just because it's here today does not mean that it's going to be here tomorrow. As a consequence, it doesn't mean that I cannot spend, but I've got to be wise with my spending, because along with my spending, I want to save something. And we learned that on last week. As a consequence, it is this Solomon who teaches us that it is the will of God for the people of God, not just for you to have more than enough to sow. Somebody shout, more than enough to sow. Not just for you to have more than enough to save. Somebody shout, more than enough to save. Not just for you to have more than enough to share. Somebody shout, more than enough to share. Not just for you to have more than enough to grow. Somebody shout, more than enough to grow. But it is this Solomon that teaches us that it is the will of God for the people of God for you to have more than enough to spend. Somebody shout, more than enough to spend. Notice what Solomon says, Proverbs chapter number 6, beginning with verse number 6. He says, go to the ant, you sluggard. If you want to be frugal in your spending and you don't want to be frivolous in your spending, if you want to be wise in your spending and you don't want to be wasteful in your spending, Solomon says, go to the ant. You go to the ant. There is an implied you in that sentence. You with a PhD, go to the ant. You with a GED, go to the ant. No matter where you fall on the spectrum of education, Solomon says, go to the ant to gain wisdom in your spending. Go to the ant to gain wisdom in your finances. Notice what he says, go to the ant. The first thing that I want to say to everyone in here under the sound of my voice is that sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. Look at the person beside you. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. I need you to find another neighbor, because that first neighbor was a little bit stuck up. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. You are big, but an ant is small, which means that in order for you to gain big wisdom, sometimes it requires humility. Sometimes in order to gain financial wisdom, you have to humble yourself and be willing to learn from somebody that you deem is smaller than you. Sometimes in order to gain financial wisdom, it requires a level of humility to the point to where you humble yourself and learn from somebody that perhaps you deem is not on your level. Just because they're smaller than you doesn't mean that they are unable to teach you. Just because they have less than you doesn't mean that they are unable to teach you. The Bible never says that poor people don't have wisdom. The Bible does say that a poor man's wisdom is despised. As a consequence, the wisdom that God wants to give you for your finances, it could come by way of somebody who is rich. It could come by way of somebody who is wealthy, but it could also come by way of somebody who is poor. It could also come by way of somebody who's made some mistakes inside of their life and somebody who does not have as much as you have. But here's the principle that I want you to gain, and the principle that I want you to get for today's message. Sometimes big wisdom comes in small package. Who in your life are you looking past? Who in your life are you looking over that you deem smaller than you? You think that you are way up here and everybody else is way down there. And you don't even recognize that God's trying to give you some big wisdom, because God wants you to do something great, something of significance. God has a plan for your life, a will for your life, a purpose for your life, plans to prosper you and not harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope, and to bring you to an expected end, according to Jeremiah chapter 29, beginning with verse number 11. But in order to do that, he's not going to drop the results inside of your lap. Before the results comes the wisdom that you need, because if he gave you the results, but he did not give you the wisdom, it won't be long until you squander the results that he gives you. And so you need wisdom. And sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. I really believe with all of my heart that the prayer that many of us need to be praying is, Lord, help me to humble myself. God, I don't want you to have to humble me, because when God humbles you, it ends in humiliation. I'm going to say that again. Lord, help me to humble myself. I don't want you to have to humble me, because when God humbles you, it ends in humiliation. The root word of humiliation is humble. And so one of the paths to humility is humiliation. Whenever God sends people to teach us and we do not listen, because we do not listen, the Bible declares in the book of Proverbs that wisdom calls for a hearing. It cries out loud in the streets. But if you do not listen when wisdom is preaching, if you do not listen when wisdom is talking, if you do not listen when wisdom is teaching, the same wisdom that taught you is the same wisdom that will mock you when calamity comes upon you. And that's a cause for humiliation. God says, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. That's 1 Peter chapter number 5, beginning with verse number 6. And God will exalt you in due time. So sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. But in order for us to learn from people and things that we deem smaller than us, it requires humility. Let the church shout, it requires humility. I need you to shout it again until the whole world hears you. Let the church shout, it requires humility. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 4 things from the ant that warrant all of our attention. Number 1, the ant is not sluggish. Look at the person beside you, say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant is not sluggish. Find somebody else. That first neighbor was a little bit stuck up. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant is not sluggish. How do you know that the ant is not sluggish? Proverbs chapter number 6, verse number 6. Go to the ant. Sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. The ant is small. He says, consider her ways and be wise. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. I want you to underline that part, thou sluggard. In other words, Solomon, who's the wealthiest man to have ever walked the earth and the wisest man to have ever walked the earth, does a comparison to the son that he's talking to. He's saying to his son, you are sluggish, but the ant is not a sluggard. There's something that you can learn from the ant. The ant is not sluggish, although you, son, you are sluggish. Before you can spend anything, you have to have the ability to earn. I want to stay right here for a second, because we run into so many people inside of our church who want something for nothing. So many people inside of our church who don't want to work, who don't want to get a job. We have jobs open inside of our learning center, and we have people who actually interview for the jobs. But when it's time to show up for the job itself, they do not show up to the job because they do not want to work. We have so many people who say, I'm glad that you hired me, but can you pay me under the table? Because if you pay me a full salary, I may lose my benefits. They don't want to work because if they work and make a full salary, there's a consequence that they may lose their benefits. Why do you want the government taking care of you when you can take care of yourself? Why do you want the government looking out for you when you can look out for yourself? Don't you know that the government is not stable? Look at the shutdown that we just got out of. The government is not stable. Look at how people lost their SNAP benefits. They were unable to get food stamps because the government is not stable. Yet so many people are waiting on the government to take care of them when they are able-bodied and they are able to work themselves. As a consequence, one of the first things that we learn from the ant is that the ant is not sluggish. And it is absolutely impossible for you to have top earning potential when you are sluggish in your work ethic. I mean, it was in fact Goody Mob. I grew up in the days of rap. Goody Mob made a song that you got to get up, get out and get something. Don't let them days of your life pass by. You got to get up, get out and get something. You can't spend all your time trying to get high. You got to get up, get out, cut that sluggishness out. In other words, if you want something, you got to go out and earn it. You can't expect for somebody to give you something for free. You can't expect for somebody to give you something for nothing. And you cannot earn if you do not get up and go to work. And you'll never get up and go to work if you don't fill out the application. For some of us right now who are without a job, our full-time job needs to be looking for a job. As a consequence, the first thing that we learn from the ant is that the ant is not sluggish. Solomon says, go to the ant, thou sluggard. Second thing that we learn from the ant is that the ant is self-motivated. Look at the person beside you. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant is self-motivated. I need you to find somebody else. That first neighbor was a little bit stuck up. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant is self-motivated. How do you know the ant is self-motivated? Go to the ant. Big things come in small packages. Thou sluggard, the ant is not sluggish. Consider her ways and be wise. Verse number 6, who having no guide, no ruler, no overseer. If you step your foot on an ant pile, or if you step your foot on an ant bed, and you start to see the ants move, those ants are busy. Not only are they busy, but the Bible declares they're not just working, but they have no guide, they have no ruler, and they have no overseer. That means that they are self-motivated. Nobody has to beg them to get up and go to work every single morning. And when they get to work, nobody has to tell them what to do. If you want to reach your top earning potential, because we cannot talk about wise spending before we talk about earning. And again, this is a message specifically for our community. And I know there are people like that in all shapes, all sizes, all races, all creeds, all genders, and all colors. But because we preach to predominantly African-American people, I'm talking about our people. I'm talking about our people post-COVID who got used to sitting on the sidelines, to sitting at home. And now that COVID is over, you do not want to go back to work. Not only is the ant busy working, but the ant is self-motivated. The ant does not have to have a boss to get up and go to work. The ant does not have to have a manager to get up and go to work. The ant does not have to have somebody looking over their shoulder to tell them every single move that they need to make when they are on the job. I want to ask you this question. When you get up and go to work, does your boss have to watch over your shoulder for you to do what you're supposed to do? When you get up and go to work, does your supervisor have to always be watching you for you to do a good job? If you're going to be like the ant, Solomon says, learn from somebody who's smaller than you, because sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. Not only can you not be sluggish, you got to be self-motivated. It shouldn't take your manager to tell you what to do. Your boss shouldn't have to tell you what to do 2 and 3 times in order for you to do what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to do it on the first time, because your first time is your witness. Dr. Beavers, what do you mean my first time is my witness? You are not just called to be a witness inside of the church. Everybody can't work for a church. God told us to go to the world, and there are people on your job who don't know Jesus. If you're trying to tell them about Jesus, but you're sorry on the job, it weakens your witness. If you're trying to tell them about Jesus, but you're late on the job, it weakens your witness. If you're trying to tell them about Jesus, but you are disrespectful to your boss and your supervisor, it weakens your witness. As a consequence, you ought to be the best employee. As a consequence, you ought to be the best worker, because the better employee you are, the stronger your witness. The better worker you are, the stronger your witness. The more that you get it on the first time and you're able to apply it, and the more self-motivated you are, and the more you are not sluggish on the job, it strengthens your witness. As a consequence, one of the first things that we learn from the ant is that the ant is not sluggish. The second thing that we learn from the ant is that the ant is self-motivated. Here's the third thing that we learn from the ant. Third thing that we learn from the ant is that the ant is a saver. Everybody repeat after me. Neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant is a saver. I need you to find somebody else. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant is a saver. Dr. Beavers, I need you to make that make sense. Show me that inside of the text. The Bible declares that the ant provides meat in the summer. Proverbs chapter number 6, beginning with verse number 8. The ant provides her meat in the summer. The ant provides her meat in the summer and gathers her harvest in the winter. The ant provides her meat in the summer and gathers food for the harvest that they might be able to have enough for the winter. Now, one of the things that you have to understand about the ant is that the ant can work in the summer, but the ant cannot work in the winter. So the ant anticipates the winter coming. The ant anticipates a season when it is unable to work. For those of you that are matriculated in business, and for those of you that have seasonal lawn care businesses, a lot of people who have seasonal lawn care businesses, you do well in the summertime. You do well in the springtime. You do well in the fall and the harvest time, but you don't do so well in the winter because nothing grows in the winter. And many people are hurting in the winter who have seasonal lawn care businesses because they spend all that they have during those 9 months when they're able to work and they don't save anything. But the fact that the Bible declares that the ant provides her meat in the summer says that the ant knows that the winter is coming, and the winter comes and the ant is unable to work. And so because the winter is coming and the ant is going to be unable to work, the Bible declares it provides her meat in the summer. So guess what? They have to eat in the summer. They have to eat in the fall. They have to eat in the winter. They have to eat in the spring, but they cannot work in the winter. And so therefore, as a consequence, because they're going into a season where they still got to eat, but they cannot work, they save a portion of what they get in the summer. I want to ask you this question. Have you ever gone into a season where you still got to eat, but you cannot work? Have you ever gone into a season where you still got to provide, but you cannot work? If you're going to survive the season where you still have to eat, but you are unable to work, you cannot spend up everything that you make because a time is coming when you are unable to produce. Therefore, as a consequence, one of the characteristics of the ant is that the ant is a saver. And one of the characteristics of a believer in Jesus the Christ, I'm not going to beat a dead horse because we talked about it on last week. We must be savers. For a review on last week, there are 2 reasons that we save. Number 1, we save for obstacles. Number 2, we save for opportunities. Let's repeat it. Everybody repeat after me. I save for obstacles. Everybody repeat after me. I save for opportunities. Regardless of your ethnic background, economical background, your race, your gender, your creed, or even your color, there will be some obstacles inside of your life. Jesus said in John chapter number 16, beginning with verse number 33, that in this world you will have tribulation, but be of good cheer. He says, because I have already overcome the world. He says, but not only will you have obstacles inside of your life, you will have opportunities inside of your life. The same Solomon who wrote this text says in Ecclesiastes chapter number 9, verse number 11, that time and chance happen to them all. So I save for obstacles. I save for opportunities. And an obstacle takes place when I'm going into a season when I still got to eat, but I cannot work. So the ant provides her food or her meat in the summer and gathers her harvest in preparation for the winter. So the third thing that we learn is that the ant is a saver. And the fourth thing that we learn, and I'm getting ready to raise up, is that the ant spends wisely. Everybody repeat after me. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant spends wisely. Find somebody else. Say, neighbor, Dr. Beavers told me to tell you that the ant spends wisely, provides her meat in the summer, that's saving, gathers her food for the harvest, that's spending. I got to save a portion because I'm going into a season, ladies and gentlemen, where I still got to eat, but I cannot work. But because I'm saving a portion, I'm eating all the time. No matter what the season is, winter I'm eating, spring I'm eating, summer I'm eating, fall I'm eating. Because I'm eating all the time, I got to spend wisely in order to make it to the season to where I won't have enough. I'm going to say it again. I got to spend wisely in order to make it to a season where I will not have enough. So notice the ant does not spend everything that it receives when it provides her food for the summer, gathering for the harvest. The ant has to spend wisely because the ant knows that I'm living on less because I got to have enough to make it last. I want to ask you this question. Are you a frugal spender or are you a frivolous spender? I want to ask you this question again. Are you a wasteful spender or are you a wise spender? The ant is frugal, not frivolous. The ant is wise, not wasteful. And if we are going to have the wisdom that we need for wise spending, sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. Don't despise anybody just because they have less than you. Don't despise anybody just because you have more than them. Don't despise anybody just because they have less education, just because they have less money, just because they have less degrees. It does not matter. You think that you're way up here and everybody else is way down there. That is not the case. Sometimes big wisdom comes in small packages. In closing, I want to reiterate this. You cannot spend if you do not earn. Yes, there is a such thing as a wealth transfer. Not all money is earned. The Bible declares that a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children, meaning that we ought to leave enough wealth to pass down, not just to our children, but to our grandchildren. Our grandchildren are not going to work for what we pass down. That's what we call a wealth transfer. But just because you get a wealth transfer does not mean that you do not have to work. Just because you don't have to work does not mean that you don't get up and go to work. Jesus received a wealth transfer at birth. The Bible declares that wise men came from the east. And when they came from the east, they gave him a wealth transfer. They presented unto him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. But he still got up and went to work every single day as a carpenter. And so I want to say to all of us, there's a such thing as a wealth transfer. But get in the habit of earning. Don't sit on the sidelines and mooch off of other people when you are able-bodied and you are willing to work for yourself. That is my time. I love you so much. It is the will of God for the people of God to have more than enough to sow, more than enough to save, more than enough to spend, more than enough to share, and more than enough to grow. You are now in the hands of your campus host. I love you so much. Peace.